The Dowager Duchess threw her dinner into the fire and screamed that someone in Blackthorne Estate wanted her dead. Her son called it the delirium of starvation, then ordered the servants never to repeat the accusation. "Mother, there is no poison in this house." Edmund Harcourt, Duke of Blackthorne, stood beside the bed, while orange flames devoured the untouched pheasant. His mother had grown so thin that the lace at her wrists seemed wider than her arms, yet her dark eyes remained terrifyingly clear. "You said the same thing when the first maid disappeared," she whispered. Edmund stiffened. "She left without notice. That is what you were told." Before he could answer, Lady Beatrice Vale entered carrying a silver medicine case. Dressed in pale blue silk, the wealthy widow looked more suited to a royal drawing room than a sick chamber. Tomorrow evening, Edmund would announce their engagement before the county's most influential families. The union would settle his growing debts and bring Blackthorne the political connections it desperately needed. Beatrice rested one hand on his sleeve. "Your mother needs quiet, not another argument." The dowager turned her face toward the wall. Edmund allowed Beatrice to lead him out, never noticing that beneath the handle of the discarded dinner tray, a tiny black mark had begun to darken in the heat. Clara Whitmore arrived at the servants' entrance before dawn the following morning with a patched wool dress, 3 shillings in her pocket, and a dented copper saucepan wrapped in linen. The pan had belonged to her mother, who had cooked for a country physician and taught Clara that the body often revealed what frightened people tried to hide. Clara needed the position desperately. Her 12-year-old brother, Samuel, was staying with the village rector while recovering from a fever, and the apothecary would provide no more medicine without payment. Mr. Rook, Blackthorne's kitchen steward, examined Clara as if she were a spoiled vegetable. "You were hired to peel roots and scour pots. You will not speak to the family, enter the upper floors, or alter a dish without my permission." "Yes, sir." His gaze settled on the saucepan beneath her arm. "Servants use the estate's equipment. It is the only thing I have left of my mother." "Then keep it out of my way." The kitchen moved with the urgency of an army preparing for battle. Tomorrow's engagement banquet required venison, glazed fruits, sugared flowers, and 6 elaborate courses, yet in one corner stood a smaller tray, holding untouched toast and cold tea. "That belongs to Her Grace?" Clara asked. A scullery maid named Lucy nodded. "She sends everything back. 4 months now. His Grace brought physicians from London, but none could help." Mr. Rook snapped his fingers. "Enough gossip." When he turned away, Clara lifted the silver cover. A bitter, medicinal scent clung to the toast, faint beneath the cinnamon. She touched nothing, but she saw a blackened scratch beneath the tray's handle. Later that morning, Lucy dropped another rejected tray beside the wash basin. It carried the same mark. "Who prepares these?" "Mr. Rook chooses the dishes. Lady Beatrice adds Her Grace's strengthening powder herself." Clara glanced toward the steward's office. "Does the Duchess know that?" "No one asks her anymore." Near noon, a bell rang violently above the kitchen door. The servants froze. "The Dowager," Lucy whispered. Mr. Rook prepared another tray, sprinkling powder from a folded paper into a bowl of broth. Clara watched him stir until it vanished. "Sir, perhaps something plain would be easier for her." He seized Clara's wrist. "You have been here 6 hours. Do not presume to understand this household." After he carried the tray upstairs, Clara uncovered the paper he had discarded. It bore no apothecary's label and contained several pale grains. She wrapped them in a scrap of cloth and slipped them into her apron. Within minutes, the bell rang again. A maid returned, with the bowl shattered across the tray. "She says she would rather starve." Clara looked at her mother's saucepan. If she obeyed, the Duchess might lose another day she could not afford. If she interfered, Clara would lose the wages Samuel needed. She lit a small burner and made a simple broth from chicken bones, parsley, barley, and salt. She used no ingredients from the prepared jars. When Mr. Rook disappeared into the wine cellar, Lucy led her through the servants' passage. The dowager lay motionless beneath heavy blankets. "I did not request another executioner," she murmured. Clara placed the bowl on the bedside table. "Then do not trust me, Your Grace." The old woman opened her eyes. Clara poured half the broth into a cup, drank it, and waited. Then she offered the same cup to the Duchess. The dowager's hand trembled as she accepted it. She took one sip, studied Clara's face, and drank again. By the time the bowl was empty, Colour had returned faintly to her cheeks. "What is your name?" "Clara Whitmore." The dowager stared at the copper saucepan. "Whitmore?" Before Clara could ask why the name mattered, footsteps sounded in the corridor. "Hide the pan," the dowager commanded, "and examine the trays." Never the food, the trays. Clara returned to the kitchen and waited until she was alone. She held one silver handle above a candle. Under the heat, the black scratches sharpened into numbers. They were dates. Each date corresponded to a night when the Duchess had suffered a violent collapse. The last mark was tomorrow's date, the night of Edmund's engagement banquet. Clara carried the tray toward the Duke's study, but Mr. Rook intercepted her. "His Grace is occupied. This concerns his mother's life." Rook's expression changed for only an instant. "Then you had better pray you are not mistaken." 2 footmen appeared behind him. They took Clara to the great hall, where Edmund and Beatrice stood reviewing the banquet arrangements. On a table between them lay a diamond necklace and several ruby brooches. "These were found beneath your mattress," Edmund said. Clara stared at the jewels. "I have never seen them before." Beatrice pressed a hand to her throat. "That necklace belonged to my late husband's mother. I did not take it." Mr. Rook placed the marked tray beside the Duke, but before Clara could reach for it, he covered the handle with his hand. "She was caught wandering upstairs," he said. "She forced herself into the dowager's chamber and gave her an unknown substance. It was broth," Clara replied. "Your mother ate because no powder had been added." Edmund's face hardened. He had heard similar suspicions from his mother and chosen to call them madness. To admit Clara might be right would mean admitting he had ignored the danger for months on the eve of an engagement that could rescue his estate. "You entered my mother's room without permission, interfered with her treatment, and stole from my guest. The jewels were planted." "Enough." Clara pulled the cloth packet from her apron. "Then have this examined, and heat the tray handles. Someone marked tomorrow for a reason." Edmund did not look at either object. "Remove her from Blackthorne." The footmen seized Clara's arms. As they dragged her toward the doors, a voice echoed from the staircase. "That girl is the only innocent person in this house." Everyone turned. The Dowager Duchess stood at the top of the stairs, gripping the banister with both hands. She had not walked beyond her chamber in 4 months. Her gaze passed over Edmund, Beatrice, and Mr. Rook before settling on Clara. "If my son sends her away," she declared, "I shall tell every guest tomorrow night what truly happened to his first wife." The footman released Clara so suddenly that she nearly stumbled against the marble floor. Edmund stared up at his mother, his face drained of colour. There was no first wife. The Dowager Duchess descended 1 careful step, then another, gripping the banister, while every servant in the hall watched. "That is the lie your father paid men to preserve, and the lie you continued because it was convenient." Lady Beatrice moved toward her with an outstretched hand. "Your Grace, you are exhausted. Please return to bed. Do not touch me." The dowager's voice cracked like a whip. Beatrice stopped. Edmund climbed the stairs and offered his mother his arm, but she passed him without taking it. She reached Clara and placed one trembling hand on the young woman's shoulder. "Bring her to my chamber. She stays under my protection." "Mother, she was found with stolen jewels. Were they discovered before or after she made me eat?" Edmund looked toward Mr. Rook. The steward answered smoothly. "Shortly afterward, Your Grace. A maid witnessed the search." "Which maid?" the dowager demanded. No one spoke. Rook's confidence faltered. Edmund saw the hesitation, yet the humiliation of being challenged before his servants hardened his expression. "Clara may remain until the magistrate arrives tomorrow, but she will be confined and watched." Clara pulled the packet of pale grains from her apron. "Have this examined first." Edmund reached for it, but Beatrice caught his wrist. "Unknown powder, carried by an accused thief? You should not touch it." Clara watched Beatrice carefully. She had not said the powder came from the kitchen, yet she seemed to understand its importance immediately. Edmund handed the packet to his secretary and ordered it locked in the study. Then he turned to Clara. "If you have harmed my mother, no protection in this house will save you. And if someone else has harmed her," Clara asked, "will your pride allow you to see it?" Anger flashed across his face, but before he could respond, his mother swayed. Clara caught her around the waist. The Duke moved a moment too late. That single delay was not lost on either of them. In the bedchamber, Clara helped the dowager beneath the blankets, While Lucy brought warm water, Edmund ordered a guard outside the door and departed with Beatrice, leaving Clara imprisoned in the very room she had entered illegally. "You should not have mentioned his first wife," Clara said when they were alone, "especially if she never existed." The old woman studied her. She existed. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. Clara's breath stopped. Her mother had been named Eleanor Whitmore, but she had never spoken of Blackthorne. She had raised Clara and Samuel in a rented cottage, supporting them by cooking and preparing remedies for a country physician. 6 years earlier, Eleanor had died after a sudden illness, leaving only the copper saucepan and a bundle of recipes. "My mother was never a duchess. Your mother married my eldest son, Arthur, in a Scottish ceremony before he inherited his father's secondary title. The marriage was genuine, though politically disastrous. When Arthur died in a riding accident, my husband concealed the union. He feared that if Eleanor was carrying Arthur's child, questions of inheritance would divide the family and threaten Edmund's future." Clara stepped away from the bed. "You expect me to believe my mother allowed her marriage to be erased? She did not allow it. She was paid, threatened, and driven from the county. I tried to find her, but my letters were returned." The dowager pointed toward the copper saucepan, now hidden beneath a chair. "I gave her that on the morning she left." Clara unwrapped it and examined the handle. She had held the pan thousands of times, yet never noticed the faint crest stamped beneath the copper, a blackthorn branch encircling the letter A. Why did she never tell me? Perhaps she believed silence would keep you safe. The dowager gripped Clara's hand. "That is why your name frightened Rook. He served my husband before he served Edmund." Clara recalled the steward's expression when she introduced herself. The jewels beneath her mattress were no longer merely an attempt to remove an inconvenient cook. Someone had recognized her and acted before she could discover why her mother had been expelled. "What does any of this have to do with your food?" Clara asked. "For months, Beatrice has brought me documents to sign after every meal. Each time I refused, I became ill. Each time I asked Edmund to read them, he told me they concerned household expenses. Did you sign 2? Never the 3rd. The dowager opened a drawer and removed a folded page with its bottom corner torn away. It authorized the transfer of several farms from the dowager's marriage settlement into a private trust controlled by Edmund after her death. One witness's name appeared beneath the signature, Tobias Rook. Clara noticed a translucent stain along the edge and smelled the same bitter sweetness that had clung to the toast. "They were not only weakening you," she said, "they were teaching everyone to expect your death." A knock sounded. Lucy entered, carrying clean linen, but her hands shook so badly that she dropped it. "Forgive me, Your Grace." As she knelt, she whispered to Clara, "They are searching the kitchen." Clara helped gather the sheets. "For what?" "Your saucepan." Mr. Rook ordered it destroyed. Clara glanced beneath the chair, but the linen wrapping was empty. Someone had taken the pan while they were speaking. She rushed to the corridor, only to find the guard blocking her way. From far below came the clang of metal striking stone. Clara pushed past him and ran down the servants' stairs. In the courtyard, Mr. Rook stood beside the estate blacksmith, who had raised a hammer over the copper pan. "Stop!" Clara cried. The hammer fell. The base split away from the pan, revealing a sealed sheet of parchment hidden between 2 layers of copper. Rook snatched it first. His eyes crossed the opening lines, and all color vanished from his face. Then he thrust the parchment into the forge. Clara seized an iron poker, dragged the burning document from the coals, and stamped out the flames. Most of the edges had blackened, but one sentence remained legible beneath 2 faded signatures. "Any lawful child born of this marriage shall retain claim to the private Blackthorne properties held outside the ducal entail." Rook reached for the paper. Clara held the hot poker between them. "You knew exactly who my mother was." The steward's mask finally slipped. "And now, Miss Whitmore, so does everyone who will benefit from your death." Clara tightened both hands around the iron poker as Rook stepped toward her. The blacksmith retreated, suddenly unwilling to take part in what was no longer the destruction of an old cooking pan, but the concealment of a marriage record. "You misunderstand me," Rook said, his voice returning to its usual calm. "People who imagine themselves heirs attract dangerous attention." "Was that a warning or a confession?" Clara asked. Footsteps sounded across the courtyard before he could answer. Edmund emerged from the house with 2 footmen behind him, followed closely by Beatrice. His gaze moved from the broken saucepan to the scorched parchment in Clara's hand. "What have you done?" "Ask your steward," Clara said. "He ordered my mother's pan destroyed because he knew what was hidden inside it." Rook bowed. The object belonged to an accused thief and might have concealed stolen property. "Miss Whitmore attacked me when I attempted to examine it." Clara held out the surviving fragment. "He threw this into the forge." Edmund took it carefully. Although much of the writing had burned away, the names Arthur Harcourt and Eleanor Whitmore remained visible above the signatures. For a moment, the Duke appeared unable to breathe. Beatrice leaned over his arm. "A scrap hidden in a servant's pan proves nothing. Anyone could have written it." "My mother knew the pan before it was broken," Clara replied, "and Rook recognized my name the moment I arrived." Edmund looked at his steward. "Is that true? I recognize the family name from old correspondence. Your Grace." Nothing more. The Duke could have ordered Rook confined. He could have summoned the solicitor who had served his father, or questioned the blacksmith about who had commanded the destruction. Instead, he folded the damaged parchment and placed it inside his coat. "Until its authenticity is established, no one will speak of this." Clara lowered the poker. "Silence protected your family once. It will not protect your mother now." His jaw tightened. "You remain under accusation of theft, and your steward remains free after attempting to burn evidence. Rook has served this estate for 27 years. Then, he has had 27 years to learn where its secrets are buried." Beatrice's expression sharpened, but Edmund merely ordered the footmen to escort Clara back inside. As they crossed the courtyard, Clara saw Rook bend to retrieve a small piece of copper from the ground. A strip of blackened material clung beneath the broken handle. Before she could call attention to it, he slipped it into his pocket. The Dowager refused to let Clara be confined elsewhere, so Edmund stationed a maid inside the chamber and a guard outside it. Yet the imprisonment gave Clara access to something Rook had overlooked. Every meal tray returned during the previous week remained stacked in an adjoining dressing room because the Dowager had forbidden the servants to remove them. Clara heated each handle over a candle. Marks appeared one by one, not merely dates, but small combinations of letters and numbers. "These resemble pantry notations," Lucy said. "Rook marks imported goods by shipment and crate." Clara copied every symbol onto the blank back of the damaged property transfer. The trays used on the nights of the Dowager's worst collapses all carried the letters BV, followed by a changing number. "Beatrice Vale," Lucy whispered. "Or something meant to make us think of her," Clara warned. "We need proof, not a convenient set of initials." She asked Lucy to bring the kitchen inventory. The maid returned an hour later with a ledger concealed beneath her apron. It showed that BV marked bottles of Barrow's valerian, a costly sleeping tincture ordered for the Dowager. The quantities made no sense. 12 bottles had entered the estate within 2 months, although a single bottle should have lasted nearly a year. Beside each delivery was Rook's signature. "Where are they kept?" Clara asked. "In the locked medicine cupboard." Clara searched the tray rims and found tiny circular stains where glass bottles had rested before the food was carried upstairs. Whoever prepared the doses placed each bottle on the same tray, leaving a trace and marking the handle to record which supply had been used. It was not poison alone. It was an experiment. Someone had been changing the dose and recording the Dowager's reaction. Clara mixed warm milk with honey and brought it to the bed. The old woman drank slowly while Clara explained what she had found. "My son must see the ledger. He has already chosen whom he trusts," Clara said. "We need something he cannot dismiss." The Dowager's eyes filled with pain rather than anger. Edmund was not always like this. When his brother died, his father taught him that doubt was weakness, and affection was a weapon others could use against him. That explains his fear. It does not excuse his choices. The Dowager nodded. "Your mother would have said the same." Near sunset, Edmund returned without Beatrice. He placed the scorched marriage fragment on the table. "My solicitor cannot authenticate this until he compares the signatures with documents kept in the family archive." "Then open the archive," Clara said. "The key is missing." She glanced at the guarded door. How fortunate for Mr. Rook. Edmund ignored the provocation and noticed the copied tray marks. Clara showed him the inventory ledger and explained the excessive Valerian orders. His confidence wavered as he studied the numbers. Valerian causes sleep, not starvation, in ordinary amounts. But these bottles may contain something else. Your mother learned that eating made her ill, so she stopped eating. Beatrice's physician supplied the tincture, and Rook received it. Which of them placed it on the trays? Edmund looked toward his mother. Lady Beatrice has cared for you every day. She brought papers every day, the Dowager corrected. There is a difference. A commotion erupted in the corridor. The guard opened the door, and Beatrice entered, supporting a pale, trembling Lucy. Behind them came Rook carrying the missing medicine cupboard key. We found this in the girl's pocket, Beatrice said. Lucy shook her head desperately. They put it there. Rook placed 3 empty bottles on the table. These were discovered beneath Miss Whitmore's bedding beside the stolen jewels. Clara picked up one bottle and smelled the neck. It carried no Valerian scent, only vinegar and burnt sugar, a crude imitation of bitterness. These were planted as well. Edmund's expression closed again. Every piece of evidence cannot be planted simply because it points toward you. Then examine the wax around the corks, Clara said. These bottles were opened today. The real ones have been used for months. Rook smiled faintly. A clever observation from a woman who claims to be merely a cook. My mother prepared medicines for a physician. You knew that too. Clara held one bottle toward the candle. A dark thread had been pressed into the sealing wax. It matched the black material Rook had taken from the broken saucepan. What is that? Edmund asked. Clara remembered her mother repairing the pan years earlier with strips cut from an old document case. It is mourning silk, she said. My mother wrapped her marriage papers in it. The Dowager suddenly gripped the edge of the bed. Her lips turned pale, and her cup slipped from her fingers. Clara caught it before it struck the floor. The warm milk smelled wrong. Beneath the honey lay the same bitter sweetness from the trays. Clara had prepared the drink herself and never left it unattended, except for the moment Edmund entered and everyone turned toward him. She looked around the room. The maid, assigned to watch her, was gone. In her place, beside the open dressing room door, stood Beatrice. The Dowager began to convulse. Send for the physician. Clara forced the old woman onto her side and reached for the packet of pale grains that should have been locked in his study. Beatrice opened her silver medicine case. Give her this. Clara struck the vial from her hand. It shattered across the floor, releasing the sharp odor of bitter almonds. Beatrice recoiled in horror. She is trying to kill her. Edmund seized Clara's wrist, but Clara pointed to the spilled liquid, eating a pale stain into the carpet. If that was medicine, Your Grace, why is it burning the wool? For the first time, Edmund did not answer. Then a servant rushed into the chamber, breathless and terrified. Your Grace, the packet you locked in the study is gone, and your secretary has been found unconscious beside the open archive door. Edmund released Clara's wrist and ran toward the archive, but she remained beside the bed. The Dowager's convulsions had weakened into shallow, uneven breaths. Clara smelled the milk again, then examined the old woman's pupils and fingertips. The bitter scent suggested one substance, but the sluggish pulse suggested another. Someone had combined a frightening odor with a powerful sleeping draught, creating the appearance of fatal poisoning while slowly suppressing the Dowager's breathing. Beatrice knelt beside the shattered vial. She struck the antidote from my hand. That was not an antidote, Clara said, and if you truly believed it was, tell me its ingredients. Beatrice's mouth tightened. I am not a physician, yet you have controlled the Duchess's medicines for months. Clara ordered Lucy to fetch hot water, salt, and ground charcoal from the kitchen. Beatrice protested that a servant had no authority to treat a duchess, but the Dowager opened her eyes long enough to whisper, "She has mine." Clara kept her awake while Lucy prepared the charcoal mixture. She asked simple questions, forced her to swallow small amounts, and rubbed her hands to maintain warmth. By the time the estate physician arrived, the Dowager's breathing had steadied. Dr. Pritchard listened to Clara's explanation, examined the residue in the cup, and quietly confirmed that her actions had likely prevented the old woman from slipping into a fatal stupor. The precise substance will require testing, he said, but this was no ordinary medicinal dose. Beatrice rose. Then Miss Whitmore had the opportunity to administer it. She prepared the milk. And I drank from the same pot, Clara replied. The substance entered the cup afterward. Lucy pointed toward Beatrice. She stood beside the dressing-room door while everyone watched his grace. Beatrice slapped her before anyone could intervene. The sound cracked through the chamber. Clara stepped between them. "Strike her again, and you will answer to me. You forget your place." "No, I have finally discovered it," Edmund returned, carrying his unconscious secretary with the help of 2 footmen. Blood darkened the young man's hair, but he was alive. In his clenched fist lay a torn strip of black mourning silk. Edmund placed him on a couch and looked at Beatrice. "Where is Rook?" "How should I know?" she asked. A servant searched the adjoining rooms and returned with the news that the steward had vanished. His horse was missing from the stable, along with the family archive key and a locked dispatch case. Edmund ordered every gate closed and riders sent along the London road. Clara knew Rook had likely prepared another route. A man who had served Blackthorne for 27 years would know its boundaries better than any pursuing groom. "Doctor." Pritchard moved toward the shattered vial, but Beatrice stepped on a large fragment and ground it beneath her shoe. "Careful," she said coldly. "The glass is dangerous." Clara crouched and collected the remaining pieces with a handkerchief. One curved fragment still held part of a paper label. Only 3 letters survived. Bah. It could have belonged to Barrow's Valerian, yet the seal was green rather than the red wax described in the inventory ledger. Someone had refilled old bottles and applied false labels. Edmund saw Clara examining it. "Give that to the physician." "No." His eyes narrowed. "This is my house. Your secretary was attacked inside your study. Evidence disappeared from a locked room, and the steward you trusted escaped with your archive. Until we know who helped him, nothing is safe simply because it remains in your house." "Doctor," Pritchard extended his hand. "She is correct, Your Grace. The fragment should be sealed before witnesses." Clara wrapped it. Lucy tied the cloth, and the physician pressed his personal signet into the wax. Edmund watched the small ceremony in silence, forced to see that a poor cook understood the protection of evidence better than he had. The secretary regained consciousness shortly after midnight. His name was Thomas Reed, a clergyman's son who had served Edmund for 3 years. He remembered opening the study safe to retrieve the pale grains at the Duke's command. Before he could seal them for transport, someone struck him from behind. "I saw a reflection in the glass cabinet," he murmured. "A man wearing the Blackthorne mourning ribbon." Edmund looked at the strip found in Thomas's fist. Such ribbons had been worn by senior servants after Arthur's death, but only Rook still kept his attached to formal livery. "Did he take the archive key?" Edmund asked. "Yes, but he opened the archive first. He removed a red ledger and several letters. I tried to stop him." Thomas reached inside his waistcoat and produced a small brass plate. "I tore this from the dispatch case. Engraved upon it were the initials A.H. The case had belonged to Arthur Harcourt. Clara examined its broken clasp. A reddish fibre remained trapped in the hinge. It was not mourning silk, but sealing cord of the kind her mother had used to bind recipe bundles. "My mother may have sent letters here," she said. The dowager's face tightened. "She did. I never received them." Edmund walked to the window, shame beginning to disturb the certainty he had worn like armor. "If Rook intercepted the letters, my father may never have known Eleanor had children. Or he knew and allowed her to disappear," Clara said. Edmund turned. "You are eager to believe the worst of my family. Your family accused me of theft within hours of hearing my name." He had no answer. By morning, the physicians agreed that the dowager would survive, but only if Clara continued supervising every meal. Edmund publicly assigned that responsibility to her, stripping Rook's assistants of access to the private kitchen. It was Clara's first victory, yet it came with danger. Whoever had poisoned the dowager now knew Clara could recognize the method. She reorganized the small kitchen, numbered every ingredient, and required 2 witnesses whenever a container was opened. Within 3 days, the dowager finished broth, porridge, soft eggs, and stewed apples. Strength returned to her voice, and news of the miraculous young cook spread through the estate. Edmund accepted the praise as evidence that his household had corrected the problem, while Beatrice began telling visitors that she had personally discovered Clara in the village and encouraged the Duke to hire her. At dinner, Clara overheard Beatrice describing the new diet as her own design. Edmund did not correct her. Instead, he announced that the engagement banquet would proceed after a delay of only 1 week. "We cannot allow household disorder to govern Blackthorne," he said. The statement was aimed at his guests, but his eyes rested on Clara. Later that evening, Lucy brought a message from the tenant village. Samuel had disappeared from the rector's cottage. His medicine remained beside his bed, and muddy wheel tracks led toward the northern boundary of the estate. Tucked beneath his pillow was a strip of black mourning silk wrapped around a single sentence: "Bring Arthur Harcourt's marriage record to the ruined mill before midnight, or the boy will learn how his mother truly died." Clara read the message twice before the words stopped blurring. Samuel had never spent a night away from her without telling someone where he was going. Even during fever, he kept their mother's old brass button beneath his pillow because he believed it brought him home safely. The button was missing with him. "I must go to the mill," Clara said. Lucy caught her sleeve. "It is a trap." "Of course it is. That does not mean Samuel is not there." Clara slipped the scorched marriage fragment inside her bodice and took the sealed piece of glass from Dr. Pritchard's locked case. The fragment from the false medicine vial might be valuable enough to exchange if Rook realized it could connect him to the poisoning. Before she reached the servants' stairs, Edmund blocked her path. He had already heard about Samuel. "You will remain here. My brother was taken because I entered your house. Rook wants the marriage record. If you carry it to him, you place yourself and the boy in greater danger. Then send men ahead of me. I have. The mill is empty." Clara studied his face. "Which mill did you search?" His hesitation answered her. Blackthorne had 3 abandoned mills, one near the river, one beyond the tenant farms, and an older one hidden in the northern woods. The note had named no location because the person who wrote it expected Clara to possess knowledge inherited from her mother. "Arthur's mill," the Dowager said from the doorway behind them. She leaned on Lucy's arm, pale but determined. "There is a ruined paper mill beyond the old quarry. Arthur met Eleanor there when my husband forbade her from entering the house. Edmund summoned 4 armed riders, but Beatrice entered before he could issue the final orders. You cannot send estate men chasing the invention of an accused thief. Our guests arrive in 6 days. If rumors spread that Blackthorne's former steward abducted a child, the engagement will become a scandal." Clara stared at her. "My brother is 12 years old, and perhaps hiding because his sister told him to create sympathy." Edmund's expression hardened. "That is enough, Beatrice." Yet when she reminded him that her uncle, Lord Westbury, would withdraw the financial settlement if the engagement were disgraced, Edmund fell silent. Blackthorne's debts were larger than Clara had understood. A collapsed bridge, 2 failed harvests, and loans signed by Edmund's late father had brought several private properties near seizure. Beatrice's marriage portion would preserve the estate, but only if Edmund remained free of any inheritance dispute. Clara's existence threatened both the money and his authority. "You believe I came to claim your title," she said. "You cannot inherit the dukedom," Edmund replied, "but the private properties named in the fragment may belong to Arthur's lawful children. So that is what truly concerns you. What concerns me is that a document no solicitor has authenticated is being used to destabilize this family. My brother was taken. That is not instability. It is a crime." The Dowager stepped forward. "Give Clara the riders." Beatrice touched Edmund's arm. "If you do, Lord Westbury will hear before breakfast. Delay until the magistrate arrives." "A few hours will change nothing." Edmund looked at Clara and then at the estate accounts lying open on his desk. This was the moment he could choose a child over his debts, evidence over reputation, an investigation over the woman whose fortune he intended to marry. Clara watched him understand that choice and turn away from it. "The riders will remain at Blackthorne," he said. "No one leaves until the magistrate has examined the accusations against Miss Whitmore." The Dowager struck him across the face. "Your brother would be ashamed of you." Edmund did not move. A red mark appeared slowly on his cheek. Clara felt something inside her become still. Until that moment, she had hoped his mistakes came from ignorance. Now she saw that he understood the danger and had deliberately chosen the comfort of delay. She removed the kitchen keys from her belt and laid them on his desk. "Your mother's meals are prepared through tomorrow morning. Lucy knows the safeguards. Where are you going? You have no right to ask." Edmund ordered the guards to stop her, but the Dowager placed herself between Clara and the door. "Touch her, and I shall announce Arthur's marriage from the balcony before every tenant on the estate." While Edmund argued with his mother, Clara escaped through the linen passage. Lucy met her at the stable with a cloak, a lantern, and the smallest estate horse already saddled. "I am coming with you." "No. Stay with the Dowager. Trust no cup you have not watched from beginning to end." Clara rode north beneath a moon hidden by cloud. At the quarry, she found a wheel rut, cutting away from the main road. It led through thorn trees to a roofless stone mill beside a dry channel. A lamp burned behind one broken window. Clara entered, carrying the scorched record in one hand and the sealed glass in the other. Samuel sat tied to a chair near the dead machinery. His lip was split, but he was conscious. Rook stood behind him with a pistol. "Put both items on the floor. Release him first. You inherited Eleanor's stubbornness. It brought her nothing but suffering." Clara lowered the parchment, but kept her foot over it. "Did you kill my mother? Your mother killed herself by returning to Blackthorne matters that should have remained buried." "That is not an answer." Rook smiled. "It is the only one you will receive." Samuel looked toward the upper gallery. The movement was slight, but Clara followed his eyes. Someone else was hidden above them. She placed the sealed glass on the floor and saw a pale blue skirt withdraw behind the railing. Beatrice had not merely protected Rook. She had come to make certain he completed the task. "You marked the trays for her," Clara said. BV was never Barrow's valerian. It meant Beatrice's varying doses. Rook's smile vanished. "You notice too much, and you record too much. That is why you stole the red ledger." A board creakled above. Beatrice stepped into view with Arthur's dispatch case in her hands. The ledger lists every payment made to Eleanor Whitmore and every letter intercepted after Arthur's death. Once it burns with the marriage record, you will have no claim and no proof. "You poisoned the Dowager for property already controlled by Edmund?" Clara asked. "Not controlled, delayed. The Dowager's settlement returns several farms to Arthur's lawful descendants, if they can be identified. Her death before recognition would transfer management to Edmund, and our marriage contract would place the income within our household." "You mean within your reach?" Beatrice's eyes hardened. "Place the document down." Clara did so. Rook moved forward, but Samuel kicked backward with both feet, knocking him into a wooden support. The pistol fired into the ceiling. Clara lunged, struck Rook's wrist with the lantern, and dragged Samuel behind the broken machinery. Beatrice screamed as burning oil spread across the gallery floor. She dropped the dispatch case, which crashed through a rotten board and landed below. Clara cut Samuel's ropes with a shard of glass and pushed him toward the door. Rook recovered first. He seized the marriage fragment and fired again. The bullet struck the stone beside Clara's head. Then riders thundered outside. Edmund entered, with a pistol drawn, followed by estate guards. For one hopeful second, Clara believed he had reversed his decision and come for Samuel. But Lord Westbury and the county magistrate entered behind him. Beatrice descended the stairs, weeping, and pointed at Clara. "She lured me here and set the mill on fire when I discovered her blackmailing Mr. Rook." Edmund saw the pistol in Rook's hand, Samuel's bleeding mouth, and the fallen dispatch case. He had every reason to question her story. Yet Lord Westbury demanded an immediate arrest before scandal reached the banquet guests. Edmund looked directly at Clara. "Give me the record and submit to the magistrate. You heard your choice before you entered this mill," she said. "Now everyone will see you make it," Beatrice claimed. Clara had forged Arthur's marriage, poisoned the Dowager, planted jewels in her own room, and abducted Samuel to invent a threat. The magistrate asked Edmund whether he supported the accusation. Clara waited, holding her brother against her side. Edmund glanced at Lord Westbury, whose fortune could rescue Blackthorne, and then at the woman who had saved his mother. "I authorize her detention," he said. The words gave Beatrice exactly what she needed. While the constables seized Clara, Rook quietly kicked Arthur's dispatch case into the spreading flames. The dispatch case landed beside a pool of burning oil, but Samuel tore free from the constable holding him and kicked it away from the flames. Rook raised his pistol. Edmund saw the movement and struck his arm aside before he could fire. The shot shattered the last intact window, spraying glass across the mill floor. "He is a child," Edmund shouted. "A practiced little accomplice," Beatrice replied, from behind Lord Westbury. Samuel seized the case and ran to Clara, but the brass lock had bent in the fall. She held it tightly while the magistrate ordered Rook's weapon taken and everyone removed from the burning building. Outside, rain began to fall through the trees, hissing against the flames that climbed the old timber supports. Clara expected the magistrate to question Samuel about his abduction. Instead, Lord Westbury drew Edmund aside. By the time they returned, the decision had been made. Clara would be confined at Blackthorne until the magistrate could examine the accusations. Samuel would be taken into the temporary custody of the parish rector, forbidden from communicating with his sister. Rook and Beatrice would remain free because, as Westbury insisted, no respectable witness had seen either of them abduct the boy. "Samuel is the witness," Clara said. The magistrate avoided her gaze. "A sick child related to the accused cannot provide reliable testimony tonight, but an escaped steward holding a pistol is reliable. Mr. Rook claims he followed Lady Beatrice after discovering your plan." Clara turned to Edmund. "This is what your authority has purchased for them. Every lie becomes respectable once you repeat it." His face tightened, but he did not withdraw his accusation. Back at Blackthorne, Clara was locked in a former schoolroom, while Samuel was taken to the rectory under guard. Arthur's dispatch case was placed in Edmund's study. Clara demanded that the magistrate seal it before witnesses, but Westbury claimed the contents belonged to the Harcourt family and could not be inspected by a servant accused of fraud. Before dawn, 3 coaches arrived at the estate carrying creditors. Rook had not fled merely to destroy evidence. Using Edmund's seal and several documents taken from the archive, he had transferred 2 grain warehouses and the northern farms as security for loans Edmund had never received. The agreements contained clauses allowing immediate seizure if Blackthorne's household became subject to a criminal investigation or disputed inheritance. Because Edmund had publicly authorized Clara's arrest and acknowledged a possible claim through Arthur's marriage, both conditions had been triggered. Men entered the barns, counted livestock, chained the granary doors, and ordered the tenants to surrender the autumn rents directly to Lord Westbury's private bank. Edmund rode into the courtyard and commanded them to leave. The senior creditor handed him agreements bearing his own signature. Months earlier, Beatrice had presented them among routine engagement settlements. Edmund had signed without reading the attached schedules, trusting her explanation and Rook's witness mark. "These transfers are fraudulent," Edmund said. "The signature is yours, Your Grace," the creditor replied. "Your steward witnessed it, and Lord Westbury's solicitor registered the securities in London." Edmund searched for Beatrice, but her rooms were empty. She and her uncle had departed before sunrise, carrying her silver medicine case and several boxes of estate correspondence. Their engagement money had never been intended to save Blackthorne. It had been bait to make Edmund sign away everything outside the ducal entail. By noon, panic spread through the tenant village. The seized warehouses contained the winter grain Clara's mother had once taught local families to preserve against failed harvests. If Westbury's men removed it, nearly 200 tenants would face hunger before spring. Edmund ordered the locks broken, but the magistrate warned that interfering with registered creditors could bring a royal inquiry and expose him to charges of unlawful seizure. For the first time in his life, the Duke of Blackthorne discovered that his title could not reverse a document he had willingly signed. The Dowager demanded Clara's release. "She saw the scheme before any of you," she said. "You imprisoned the one person who could trace it." Edmund entered the schoolroom, carrying the false loan agreement, and found Clara seated beside a cold fireplace. "Rook and Beatrice are gone," he said. "Westbury has taken the farms. You gave him the means. I did not know what I signed. You did not wish to know. There is a difference." He placed the agreement on the table. "Can you identify how it was done?" Clara did not touch it. "Am I still your prisoner?" "The magistrate has not withdrawn the theft accusation." "Then ask the magistrate to save your estate." Edmund's restraint cracked. "Hundreds of people may lose their grain. Those people begged you for riders when Samuel was taken. You chose your engagement." The truth struck harder than accusation. He turned toward the window, where Westbury's men were loading sacks onto wagons. "Name your terms." "Samuel returns to me immediately. Lucy is released from questioning. Your mother's settlement, meals, and correspondence are placed beyond Beatrice's control. The dispatch case is opened before neutral witnesses, and every accusation against me is read publicly, rather than whispered through your servants. If the case contains nothing, then you will still have done what was right too late." Edmund summoned the rector, Dr. Pritchard, the magistrate, and 3 tenant representatives. Samuel was returned to Clara, and Lucy brought the dispatch case into the great hall. Before the witnesses, the blacksmith cut the bent lock. Inside lay only ashes and several blank sheets. Someone had opened the case during the night, removed its contents, burned them elsewhere, and relocked it. Westbury had anticipated Edmund's hesitation and used it again. The magistrate declared that Clara's supposed claim now rested on a scorched fragment of uncertain origin. Edmund's last easy route to challenge the fraudulent loans had vanished. Yet when Clara lifted the empty case, she heard something move inside its lid. The interior lining had been slit and repaired with newer thread. Using a table knife, she opened the seam and found a narrow strip of paper concealed beneath the leather. It was not the marriage record or the red ledger. It was a list of payments made over 6 years to an apothecary in the village where Eleanor Whitmore had died. The final entry, dated 3 days before her death, was marked with Rook's initials and a single instruction: increase the dose before she reaches Blackthorne. Edmund read the line and went completely still. Your mother was murdered. Perhaps, Clara said, fighting the grief rising in her throat, but this list alone will not prove who ordered it. Samuel touched the brass plate on the case. Clara, the letters are loose. He turned the case upside down and shook it. One of the engraved initials shifted beneath his finger. The plate was not solid. It covered a tiny mechanical compartment. Clara remembered her mother teaching her never to trust the visible bottom of a storage tin. She pressed the letter H, and a hidden drawer sprang open. Inside lay a miniature key and a folded map of the northern farms. 3 warehouses were circled in red, and beneath them Arthur had written a warning. The title cannot protect the land, but Eleanor's marriage settlement can. If my father denies her, take the original to the tenant's chapel. Clara looked toward the chained wagons already leaving the courtyard. The only document capable of stopping Westbury's seizure had been hidden somewhere inside a chapel abandoned 20 years earlier, and the creditors would remove the winter grain at sunrise. Clara spread Arthur's map across the table and traced the old boundary lines with her fingertip. The abandoned tenant's chapel stood beyond the northern farms, inside land now claimed by Lord Westbury's bank. If the marriage settlement remained there, reaching it would require crossing fields guarded by his men. Edmund ordered horses prepared, but Clara folded the map and placed it inside her dress. You are not coming. Those are my family's lands. They may belong to Arthur's lawful children, which is precisely why your presence would draw attention. You cannot expect me to remain here while you risk your life repairing what I allowed. I am not repairing your mistake. I am protecting Samuel and the tenants from it. Edmund accepted the distinction with visible difficulty. Clara chose Lucy, Samuel, and Mr. Henshaw, an elderly tenant who had maintained the chapel grounds before the roof collapsed. Dr. Pritchard remained with the Dowager and sealed a written account of her symptoms in case the poisoners returned. Before Clara left, Edmund handed her a pistol. She refused it and took the small kitchen knife that had belonged to her mother instead. A weapon is only useful if I know how to use it. They departed separately after nightfall. Lucy travelled openly toward the village with an empty medicine basket, while Clara and Samuel hid beneath sacks in Henshaw's cart. At the northern gate, Westbury's guards searched the wagon but recoiled when Lucy claimed the covered jars contained waste from the sick room. The cart passed unchallenged. Beyond the farms, they followed a sunken lane until the ruined chapel appeared between yew trees. Half its roof had fallen, and ivy covered the stone entrance. Henshaw led them to a burial plaque bearing Arthur Harcourt's name. It arrived after his funeral, he said. The old Duke refused to place it in the family chapel because it included words chosen by a woman. Clara cleaned away the moss. Beneath Arthur's name was a short inscription: "Truth lives where bread is freely broken." Samuel looked toward the crumbling communion rail. Bread was broken at the altar. Clara searched the altar stones but found no loose section. Then she remembered the copper saucepan and the paper hidden between its layers. Her mother had concealed documents inside ordinary objects because grand rooms belonged to powerful men, while kitchens and chapels were ignored. Clara examined the wooden bread box built into the wall. Its base contained 2 layers. The miniature key opened a narrow brass lock between them. Inside lay a leather packet wrapped in waxed cloth. It held Arthur and Eleanor's original marriage certificate, witnessed by a Scottish minister and 2 Blackthorne tenants, along with a marriage settlement granting Eleanor and her lawful children the northern farms, warehouses, and income from 3 private properties. The documents bore seals, signatures, and a notarial ribbon that could be authenticated. There were also 12 letters Eleanor had written to the Dowager after Arthur's death. The final one revealed that she intended to return to Blackthorne with Clara and the infant Samuel, because a man had been following her and adding an unknown powder to her medicine. She named Tobias Rook. Clara pressed the letter against her chest, grieving the years stolen from her mother. A sound came from outside. Horses surrounded the chapel. Rook stepped through the doorway with 4 armed men. "Thank you for locating the packet," he said. Henshaw moved in front of Clara, but one man struck him to the ground. Lucy screamed. Rook seized the leather packet, removed the marriage certificate, and held it over a lantern flame. Clara drew her knife and sliced the lantern's hanging cord. It crashed onto the damp stone and went out before the paper caught. Samuel threw himself at the man guarding the door, while Lucy pulled the chapel bell rope. The cracked bell gave a single thunderous note that rolled across the tenant fields. Rook dragged Clara backward by her hair. "Your mother was offered enough money to disappear. She chose to return. So you poisoned her." "I followed orders." "Whose?" Rook tightened his grip. "Arthur's father is dead. Blame him if it comforts you." Clara heard the evasion. Rook had not said the old Duke ordered the final dose. She drove her heel into his knee, broke free, and snatched the marriage certificate from his hand. A gunshot exploded outside. Then dozens of lanterns appeared beyond the broken windows. The tenant families were coming. The chapel bell had once summoned them during fire and flood, and they still recognized its warning. Westbury's hired men fled rather than face an entire village. Rook tried to escape through the ruined sacristy, but Henshaw caught his ankle with a fallen length of chain. The tenants bound him before he could reach his horse. Edmund arrived moments later with the magistrate and estate riders. He dismounted, saw Clara holding the original certificate, and stopped several feet away rather than claiming it from her. "You found it. My mother preserved it. The tenants protected it. You did neither." Before everyone assembled in the chapel, Clara gave the packet to the magistrate, who recorded its condition and sealed each document separately. 2 elderly tenants recognized their father's signatures as witnesses to the marriage. The marriage settlement was strong enough to halt the removal of grain until a London court examined Westbury's loans. At sunrise, the creditor wagons were turned back. The tenants cheered Clara, not Edmund. He stood beside the chapel door, watching the people he had governed thank the woman he had imprisoned. Rook was taken to the estate's stone holding room, but he refused to identify Beatrice's location or admit who had ordered Eleanor's death. "You have a few letters and an old settlement," he told Clara. "Enough to recover land, perhaps, not enough to convict a lady." Clara knew he was right. The marriage certificate restored her legal standing, but Beatrice could still claim Rook acted alone. The poisoning, forged loans, planted jewels, and Eleanor's death required a chain of evidence that could survive more than public suspicion. Edmund approached Clara after the others left the chapel. "I will withdraw every accusation against you. You will correct them publicly. Lucy will receive compensation. Samuel's treatment will be paid from the recovered farm income, not as your charity. The Dowager will control her household and settlement. No servant will be dismissed for speaking against Rook or Beatrice." Edmund nodded at each condition. "And you, I will take lawful control of the northern properties until the court decides Samuel's and my rights. You will not manage them for me." The loss of authority cut visibly, but he agreed. "What must I do to earn your trust?" "Stop asking what you can earn before you have repaired what you broke." Clara walked away, leaving him alone beneath Arthur's memorial. That evening, she established her base in the northern steward's cottage, outside Edmund's household control. Henshaw brought tenant records. Lucy copied the medicine inventory, and Dr. Pritchard compared the Dowager's symptoms with Eleanor's final letters. Together, they discovered that every false Valerian shipment had passed through a warehouse owned by Lord Westbury under a trading name. The sealed glass fragment carried a partial maker's mark belonging to the same apothecary listed in Arthur's hidden payment record. The evidence was fragile, but connected. Clara prepared to travel there at dawn. Before she could leave, Edmund arrived without servants or weapons. He handed her a sworn statement, admitting that he had signed Westbury's securities, unread, ignored his mother's accusations, refused riders when Samuel was taken, and authorized Clara's detention despite contradictions he had chosen not to examine. If this becomes public, I may lose my seat in the Lords and the confidence of every creditor attached to Blackthorne, he said. It should become public, Clara replied. I know. It was the first costly truth he had offered without asking for forgiveness. Clara accepted the statement, but made no promise in return. At that moment, Samuel ran in, carrying a parcel delivered by an unknown rider. Inside lay Lucy's blood-stained apron and the sealed glass fragment that should have remained locked in Dr. Pritchard's case. Clara turned toward the doorway. Lucy had been beside her less than 10 minutes earlier. On the floor beneath the open window, a trail of blood led toward the woods, and pinned to the parcel was an invitation bearing Beatrice's crest. Bring the marriage settlement to tomorrow's engagement banquet, or your little witness will never speak again. Clara followed the blood trail until it vanished at the edge of the woods. One deep footprint marked the mud beside a broken branch, but there were no signs of continued struggle, and no drops beyond the first 30 yards. It may not be Lucy's blood, Clara said. Samuel stared at the stained apron. Why would she leave without telling us? Clara examined the fabric. The blood had been poured across the front, rather than absorbed from a wound beneath it. Near the pocket, she found a grain of blue sealing wax, the same color Beatrice had used on the engagement invitation. Lucy might still be alive, but the abductors wanted Clara frightened enough to carry the original settlement into their hands. Edmund ordered riders to search the woods, the Western Road, and every property connected to Westbury. Clara stopped him before he sent the final group. Beatrice wants us to scatter our men. The banquet is the true destination. Although the original engagement celebration had been delayed, Lord Westbury had moved it to his London residence and invited creditors, magistrates, members of Parliament, and half the county. If Beatrice publicly married Edmund, or claimed that he had abandoned their agreement because Clara had deceived him, she could preserve Westbury's influence and discredit the Whitmore claim before society's most powerful witnesses. I will announce the engagement is ended, Edmund said. That will not prove the loans were fraudulent, or that Beatrice poisoned your mother. Then what will? A mistake she believes only Lucy can expose. Clara returned to the Dowager's chamber and asked who had first introduced Beatrice to Blackthorne. The old woman remembered receiving a letter supposedly written by Eleanor shortly before her death. It claimed Eleanor had surrendered all interest in Arthur's settlement and begged the family never to contact her children. Beatrice, then the young widow of a distant Harcourt cousin, had delivered the letter personally. The document had persuaded the Dowager to stop searching for Clara. Where is it? Clara asked. Rook placed it in Arthur's dispatch case. The letter was missing, but its existence reframed the entire scheme. Beatrice had known about Eleanor and her children for at least 6 years, long before she began courting Edmund or poisoning the Dowager. She had not discovered an inheritance problem after arriving at Blackthorne. She had entered the family specifically to control it. Clara questioned Rook again, but the steward laughed through swollen lips. Lady Beatrice will stand before 200 respectable guests. You will stand before them as a cook whose brother expects to inherit a fortune. Which story do you imagine they will prefer? The one containing a fact you could not have known unless Beatrice told you. His smile weakened. You have no such fact. Clara left without replying. That night, Westbury's solicitor arrived with constables and a court order accusing Clara of stealing the northern settlement from Blackthorne's archive. The order named Eleanor's marriage certificate a suspected forgery and demanded its surrender for examination in London. Edmund refused entry, but the solicitor produced his signed engagement articles. One clause granted Lord Westbury temporary authority over disputed private property documents if the marriage was cancelled because of fraud by a rival claimant. Again, Edmund's unread signature armed the people destroying him. The magistrate could not lawfully prevent the seizure. Clara handed over a sealed leather packet before the constables searched the cottage. Westbury's solicitor smiled, as if victory were complete. He did not know that the packet contained an accurate copy prepared by the rector. The original settlement and marriage certificate had already been divided. The ministerial record was secured with the magistrate, the settlement with the tenant trustees, and Arthur's letters with Dr. Pritchard. No single theft could erase the truth again. Yet Beatrice struck where Clara had not expected. By morning, newspapers across London carried a story naming Clara an ambitious kitchen maid who had seduced a grieving duke, forged a secret marriage for her dead mother, poisoned the dowager, and abducted her own brother. Beatrice announced that Edmund had been manipulated during his mother's illness and would honor their engagement once Clara was imprisoned. The report quoted 2 Blackthorne servants. Both had been dismissed by Clara after she secured the private kitchen, and both claimed they had watched her place powder in the dowager's milk. When Clara entered the tenant village, several women pulled their children away. Reputation, once poisoned, moved faster than any antidote. The magistrate warned that unless Lucy appeared, her disappearance would be treated as further proof that Clara had silenced a witness. "Beatrice has made herself appear to be the victim," Samuel said, "and she has forced the banquet to become a trial," Clara replied. Edmund offered to go alone and confess everything he had signed. Clara allowed him to attend, but only under her conditions. He would publicly admit that he had authorized her arrest despite evidence of Rook's guilt, refused riders when Samuel was kidnapped, and signed the securities without reading them. He would surrender his position on the county relief board, which gave him authority over the seized grain, and ask the tenants, not Clara, to appoint a replacement. His confession would not prove Beatrice guilty, but it would destroy her claim that Clara had secretly controlled him. "And after I say it?" he asked. "You stand silent while I finish what you failed to investigate." He accepted. Before they departed for London, a stable boy found Lucy unconscious inside an empty feed wagon, returning from Westbury's warehouse. She was bruised but alive. When she awoke, she remembered being seized from behind and forced to write a statement, claiming Clara had poisoned the dowager. She had refused. Her captor had then cut her apron away and taken the sealed glass fragment. "Did you see his face?" Clara asked. "No, but he kept calling Lady Beatrice my lady, and he smelled of cloves." Rook always chewed cloves to conceal the bitter medicinal scent on his breath, yet he had remained locked in the holding room throughout Lucy's abduction. Clara inspected the stone chamber and found the door secured, the window barred, and the guard certain Rook had never left. Then she noticed clove oil staining the guard's cuff. He admitted Rook had given him a small bottle to ease a toothache. Beatrice had deliberately planted Rook's scent on Lucy's captor, expecting Lucy to accuse the steward if she survived. The attempt to frame her own accomplice revealed something Clara had overlooked. Beatrice believed Rook might testify against her. Clara returned to the false medicine bottles and examined the green wax seals. Pressed within one seal was a tiny thread of blue silk, not mourning ribbon, but fabric from Beatrice's engagement gown. At the mill, Beatrice had stood above the lantern when Rook claimed Eleanor's death was ordered by Arthur's father. She had not objected because she expected him to bear every crime. "She will lie about when she first saw these bottles," Clara said, "and Rook knows the true date." Edmund studied her. "How will you make either of them admit it?" Clara placed Beatrice's invitation beside the sealed bottle. "I will not ask them to confess. I will give Beatrice a bottle she believes was destroyed, let her explain why it cannot exist, and force Rook to decide whether he wishes to hang for a murder she ordered." They arrived at Westbury House as the engagement banquet began. Through the open doors, Clara saw Lucy standing beside the magistrate, the recovered records sealed on a long table, and Beatrice descending the staircase in her pale blue engagement gown. Lord Westbury raised a forged marriage settlement before the assembled guests and declared Clara Whitmore a criminal. Edmund stepped into the hall and removed the ducal chain from his shoulders. Clara followed, carrying a single green-sealed bottle. Beatrice looked at it and whispered to her uncle, "That is impossible. I watched the last one burn with Eleanor." The whisper was quiet, but Clara had arranged for the county magistrate, Dr. Pritchard, Lucy, and 2 tenant representatives to stand close enough to hear it. Lord Westbury seized Beatrice's arm before she could say more. "You are distressed, my dear. You have mistaken the object." Clara advanced into the hall, while the assembled guests drew back from her plain, dark dress, as though poverty itself were contagious. On the long table lay the forged settlement Westbury had presented, its seals polished and its parchment unnaturally clean for a document supposedly hidden for more than 20 years. Beside it stood the silver tray, taken from the dowager's chamber, and the scorched fragment recovered from the copper saucepan. Lady Beatrice has accused me of inventing my mother's marriage, poisoning the Dowager Duchess, stealing her jewels, abducting my brother, and manipulating the Duke of Blackthorne, Clara said. Tonight, she shall be permitted to explain every accusation before the witnesses she selected. Beatrice regained her composure. There is nothing to explain. You entered the estate under a false name and created a crisis so that you could claim its property. Whitmore is my name. A fortunate name for a woman carrying a forged record. Lord Westbury raised the document from the table. This is the authentic settlement from the Blackthorne archive. It contains no marriage to Eleanor Whitmore and grants no property to her children. Clara did not reach for it. Who found it? My solicitor. Where? Inside Arthur Harcourt's dispatch case. Samuel stepped forward. That case was empty when we opened it before witnesses. Westbury smiled. A child's memory is easily shaped by his sister. Clara turned to the magistrate. He read aloud the inventory made when the case was opened at Blackthorne. Ashes, blank sheets, a hidden list of payments, a map, and a miniature key. No complete settlement had been found inside. Therefore, Lord Westbury's document entered the case afterward, Clara said, or it was never there at all. Beatrice dismissed the contradiction as an error by frightened servants. Clara then asked her when she had first heard the name Eleanor Whitmore. After this woman arrived at Blackthorne, not 6 years ago, when you delivered a letter supposedly written by my mother. A murmur moved through the guests. The Dowager's sworn statement was opened and read. It described Beatrice bringing Eleanor's alleged renunciation to the estate shortly after her death. Beatrice claimed the old woman's starvation had damaged her memory. Then let us use your memory instead, Clara said. She lifted the green-sealed bottle. What is this? I have never seen it. A moment ago, you said you watched the last one burn with Eleanor. Beatrice's eyes flicked toward her uncle. You misheard me. 5 people heard you. 5 people loyal to a thief. Clara handed the bottle to Dr. Pritchard, who explained that the wax, glass shape, and surviving label matched the fragments collected after Beatrice's supposed antidote shattered in the Dowager's chamber. Chemical examination had identified a mixture of valerian, laudanum, and a bitter aromatic oil. The dose could weaken breathing, create confusion, and make repeated meals appear to cause illness. Beatrice raised her voice. Clara prepared the Dowager's milk. Her own maid witnessed it. The 2 dismissed kitchen servants stepped forward and repeated their statements. Clara asked the first woman which hand she had used to pour the powder. Her right. And where did I stand? Beside the bed. The milk was poisoned while I stood near the dressing-room door, according to your written statement yesterday. The servant faltered. Clara turned to the second. What color was the cup? White porcelain with painted roses. Lucy uncovered the cup preserved from that night. It was blue earthenware without decoration. Neither servant had been present. Their statements had been composed by someone who had never entered the Dowager's private chamber. Lord Westbury tried to end the proceedings, but Edmund stepped before the doors. He removed the ducal chain completely and placed it on the table. This continues. The room fell silent. He admitted that he had ignored his mother's warnings, signed Westbury's securities without examining them, refused Clara riders when Samuel was abducted, and authorized her arrest despite seeing evidence against Rook. No enchantment compelled me, he said. No servant controlled my hand. Lady Beatrice exploited my vanity, my fear of insolvency, and my willingness to protect appearances. But those weaknesses were mine. Every authority she used against Clara was an authority I gave her. Lord Westbury's face darkened. Consider what this confession will cost you. I have considered what my silence cost everyone else. Edmund announced his resignation from the County Relief Board and surrendered management of the disputed farms until the court ruled. His statement destroyed Beatrice's defense that Clara had secretly manipulated him, but Clara neither thanked him nor softened. He had finally spoken truth. That did not erase the choices that made it necessary. Clara placed the 3 sets of documents side by side. Westbury's alleged original, the authentic marriage certificate recovered from the chapel, and the marriage settlement held by the tenant trustees. The forged document spelled Eleanor's middle name as Anne. Both authenticated records spelled it Anne without the final letter. Its witness list also included Tobias Rook, although he had not entered Blackthorne service until 2 months after Arthur's Scottish marriage. The error proves only that someone copied imperfectly, Westbury said. It does not prove who. The paper does, Clara replied. Henshaw brought forward the chapel's bread box and explained how the true documents had remained sealed inside it. The original sheets bore a faint watermark from a Scottish mill destroyed by fire the year after Arthur's marriage. Westbury's document bore no visible mark. Then your paper has no greater claim, Beatrice said. Clara held both sheets above a warming tray. On the true settlement, the old watermark appeared. On Westbury's forgery, another symbol emerged beneath the heat, WV, the mark of Westbury Vale Paperworks, founded 8 years after Arthur's death. The guests erupted in whispers. Beatrice turned toward the door, but the magistrate ordered the constables to remain in place. Lord Westbury declared that Rooke had forged the document without his knowledge. At that moment, Rooke entered under guard, his wrists chained. He saw Beatrice in her blue gown and the green sealed bottle on the table. She promised I would be protected, he said. Beatrice pointed at him. That man murdered Eleanor Whitmore and poisoned the Dowager. I knew nothing of it. Clara placed Arthur's hidden payment list before him. The final payment was made 3 days before my mother died. Who supplied the medicine? Rooke looked at Beatrice. She held his gaze with cold contempt, certain his word could not overcome hers. Lord Westbury's apothecary supplied it, he said, but the instruction to increase Eleanor's dose came in a letter sealed by Lady Beatrice. A condemned liar, Beatrice replied. Where is this convenient letter? Destroyed. Her smile returned. Clara had expected that answer. She lifted the green sealed bottle and asked Rooke to identify the thread embedded in its wax. Silk cut from Lady Beatrice's engagement gown, he said. She sealed every altered bottle herself. Beatrice laughed. That gown was made last month. Eleanor died 6 years ago, and the Dowager was poisoned before the final fitting. The silk cannot connect me to either crime. Clara waited until the room understood what Beatrice had revealed. No one had stated that the thread came from the finished gown, or that this bottle had been used on Eleanor. Yet Beatrice knew precisely which crimes Clara intended it to connect. More importantly, she had made one claim that could be tested immediately. Clara turned to the dressmaker, standing among the invited tradespeople. The woman carried her account book forward and opened it to the order for Beatrice's gown. The blue silk had not been purchased last month. It had been supplied 6 years earlier for another garment commissioned under a different name. The dressmaker pointed to the original customer's signature, but before she read it aloud, Clara placed Eleanor's final letter beside the account. The handwriting appeared identical. The dressmaker read the name aloud, Mrs. Beatrice Vale. Silence settled over the hall. 6 years earlier, Beatrice had ordered a travelling dress in the same blue silk, later used to seal the altered medicine bottles. Eleanor's final letter, supposedly renouncing her marriage and her children's rights, had been written in handwriting identical to Beatrice's signature in the account book. The lie that had erased Clara's mother from Blackthorne had not begun with Rooke or Lord Westbury. It had begun with Beatrice. Similar handwriting proves nothing, Lord Westbury snapped. Clara placed Eleanor's genuine letters beside the forged renunciation. Her mother formed every capital E with a narrow loop and ended Whitmore with an upward stroke. The renunciation used the broad E and downward flourish visible throughout Beatrice's private correspondence. The ink also contained powdered indigo, a fashionable additive used by Westbury's London stationer, but unavailable in the village where Eleanor had supposedly written it. The magistrate asked Dr. Pritchard whether the medicine sent to Eleanor could have caused her death. He could not establish the exact dose after 6 years, but her final symptoms slowed, breathing, confusion, inability to remain awake, matched the effects suffered by the Dowager. Arthur's payment list connected Rooke to the apothecary. The forged letter established Beatrice's effort to silence Eleanor's claim. The altered bottles connected the same method to the Dowager, while Westbury's securities revealed the financial motive. Lady Beatrice learned of Arthur's marriage through her late husband's family, Clara said. She knew that if Eleanor or her children returned, the northern farms and warehouses would pass beyond the Duke's control. She forged my mother's renunciation, paid Rooke to intercept her letters, and ordered her medicine increased before she could reach Blackthorne. Years later, Beatrice entered Edmund's household as his grieving friend. She weakened the Dowager, placed documents before her after every dose, and persuaded Edmund to sign securities transferring the same properties to her uncle's bank. Clara turned toward Rook. "Why mark the trays?" "Lady Beatrice demanded a record of every dose," he said. The dates showed how much the Dowager had taken and when she collapsed. Once everyone expected her death, we could increase the final dose during the engagement banquet. Beatrice's face twisted. "You administered it, at your command." Rook revealed that the red ledger contained payments, coded dosages, and the names of servants bribed to alter the kitchen records. He had not destroyed it. Knowing Beatrice might abandon him, he had hidden it inside the stone base of Arthur's memorial at the tenants' chapel. The magistrate sent 2 constables to recover it. Lord Westbury attempted to leave, but Edmund barred the doorway. "You entered my estate as a guest and used my seal against my tenants," Westbury sneered, "and you made it easy. Do not pretend you stand with them now." "I do not pretend. My guilt does not reduce yours." The red ledger arrived before midnight. Its entries matched the tray dates, apothecary payments, forged loans, and deposits made to the 2 servants who had lied about Clara. Beatrice's instructions appeared in a private cipher, but the key had been written in the margin of her engagement contracts because she had assumed no one would compare romantic correspondence with kitchen accounts. Clara recognized the repeated measures from her mother's recipe system and translated them before the witnesses. Faced with documentary proof and Rook's testimony, the servants recanted. Lord Westbury's solicitor surrendered copies of the securities and admitted that his employer had ordered them registered before Edmund signed the final engagement agreement. The magistrate placed Beatrice, Lord Westbury, Rook, and the bribed apothecary under arrest. Rook's cooperation spared him the harshest possible judgment, but not imprisonment. Westbury's fraudulent securities were suspended, his bank subjected to investigation, and his claim to the Northern grain cancelled. Beatrice's fortune was seized, pending restitution to the Dowager, the Whitmore children, and the affected tenants. She looked toward Edmund as the constables approached. "You asked me to save Blackthorne. Everything I did was for the future you wanted." Edmund's face showed the horror of recognizing part of the truth within her lie. He had wanted wealth without scrutiny, certainty without evidence, and obedience without responsibility. "I wanted an easier future," he said. "You murdered for it, and I opened the door." Beatrice turned to Clara. "Do you imagine this family will ever accept a cook as Arthur Harcourt's daughter?" Clara stepped aside so the constables could take her. "I do not require their acceptance to be my mother's child." In the weeks that followed, the Scottish marriage and settlement were formally authenticated. Because the northern farms and warehouses were private property rather than part of the ducal entail, they passed in trust to Clara and Samuel. Clara used the first recovered income to return the winter grain, repair tenant roofs, pay Lucy generous compensation, and establish an independent kitchen and infirmary in the northern village. The Dowager regained enough strength to walk there herself. Before the assembled tenants, Edmund withdrew every accusation against Clara, admitted that the jewels had been planted, and acknowledged Eleanor Whitmore as Arthur's lawful wife. He also read his confession concerning Samuel's abduction and his refusal to investigate. No one applauded him. Public truth was an obligation, not a performance deserving reward. Edmund resigned from the relief board, surrendered control of the disputed properties, and sold an unentailed hunting lodge to repay losses caused by the securities he had signed. He dismissed every servant involved in the scheme, only after ensuring they could testify without retaliation. When he asked Clara what more he could do, she gave him her mother's letters. Read every one, then answer them with actions, not apologies. Months passed. Edmund visited the northern farms only when invited and never issued an order there. He repaired the bridge from his private funds, opened the ducal archives to independent examination, and supported the prosecution even when it exposed his negligence to Parliament. His political standing collapsed, and several aristocratic families withdrew their invitations. He accepted the losses without asking Clara to soften the truth. One spring morning, the Dowager sat beside an open window in Clara's new kitchen. Before her stood a silver tray, but its handle bore no hidden marks. Clara poured broth from the repaired copper saucepan, its broken base now framed on the wall beside Eleanor and Arthur's authenticated marriage certificate. Edmund waited outside rather than entering uninvited. "Will you forgive him?" the Dowager asked. Clara watched Samuel teaching village children to plant herbs in the garden. Forgiveness may come one day. Trust will have to be built from the beginning. She carried a second bowl to the doorway. Edmund straightened, but she did not invite him inside. Instead, she placed the bowl on the garden table between two separate chairs. "You may sit," she said. "You may listen, and you may leave when I ask." He accepted the terms without touching her. Inside, the woman who had once refused every meal lifted her spoon without fear. Outside, Clara sat beneath the morning sun, with her mother's saucepan beside her, her property secure, her brother safe, and her future entirely in her own hands.